Welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, speaking as the Autistic Me. This time I am joined by another voice, the witty, eccentric, and bearded Australian media personality, Ben Sorensen. I think it's interesting that I'm sitting here in my home office grading speeches recorded by students at the university. And my job as an instructor is to teach them to pass as comfortable on a stage, to teach them how to give a presentation in a business environment. So here I am using the same skills that help me get through the day. I am using those skills to help my students who are probably, looking at the statistics, at least half of them are neurotypical, whatever that means. So I'm helping them with the skills that I've had to use day after day just in basic conversation. I'm helping them adapt to public speaking, business communication. It's interesting because a lot of them will say, well, I'm a math major, I'm a business major, I'm an economist. And I like to point out, yeah, and which economist do you know? Paul Krugman. Why do you know Paul? Because he's on TV. He's doing media. You may say, well, I just want to focus on the numbers, but the ugly reality, even in a field like economics, is that it's the person who can do the interview. It's the person who can be on CNN, MSNBC, Sky News, BBC, Deutsche World, whatever it is. Those are the individuals in economics who get famous.
Yep. But then here's the thing, right? We talk about, you mentioned famous. So I like to believe that being famous is a byproduct of being really good at something. Not always the case these days. But as animals, we gravitate towards, as gregarious animals, we gravitate towards those who have those social skills and the ability to communicate. So I think one of the larger, outside of autism, one of the larger social issues is we have this quest for empty fame, as opposed to being confident and comfortable within ourselves and then sharing that story. We have this ego quest for fame. And I find that a really fascinating point, and also one that I think a lot of autistic people sometimes get confused, not so much confused about, but they externally present in a similar way to those questing for, ego validation. And I think that that's something that's also really important as a society. I think we've lost a lot of the ability to identify nuance and are more about broad brushstrokes. And I think that the autistic person who has a genuine passion for their special area of interest, or their genuine, ability to communicate, or their genuine ability, does sometimes get confused with those who are just out there for the fame as such. And there's a lot of really great specialists out there in their respective fields that are there simply because they just absolutely adore the topic.
When you have to go through most of your life and into your adulthood masking and mastering communication skills, it is easy to be accused of being fake, being phony, because we don't get things right. Even when I'm saying precisely what I mean, or I'm saying exactly what I think needs to be said, there will be people who say, oh, you're just saying that, or oh, you're just doing that. And part of that is that inability to understand why other people would perceive telling the truth as opportunistic, or saying something as opportunistic, when all I'm doing is saying, no, that answer's wrong. This is the right way to do something. But we are so conditioned, I think you're right, to perceive everyone else as chasing something and as opportunistic. So if everyone thinks the other person is in it for the wrong reason, it becomes this horrible cycle of distrust and cynicism. And then when you aren't cynical and you are telling the truth, nobody can possibly believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the default position that most people have in a sick society, which is what I believe we're in, makes it a lot harder to connect as a neurotypical person or as an autistic person with other people, because we are inherently trained that that default position is that what's in it for the other person. Why are they trying? How are they trying to manipulate me to do something, as opposed to here's someone that just says exactly what they think and they don't play games. You know, I think sometimes we're taught to be wary of wild cards, and I think sometimes blunt truth can be seen as a wild card.
The other extreme that we see is the autistic, awkward genius portrayed as, I'm trying to think of how you would even describe it, somewhat likable, somewhat lovable, but awkward. The TV show The Big Bang Theory.
Sheldon Cooper.
I've managed to sit through, I think, half of one episode in my entire life. Extremely painful. I don't know that I find shows that highlight autistic characters to be helpful. Kind of, oh, isn't that adorable how awkward he or she is?
Yeah, I think the difference is a neurotypical, exaggerated interpretation of an autistic person is different to an actual autistic person. You know, and I think Sheldon, even though it's not what we would consider to be accurate based on our lived experience, I think that some of those cringeworthy autistic characters are important in creating and varying our view of humans in our society from a neurotypical point of view. So we aren't the target market as autistics for those autistic shows or shows with autistic characters. So even though the end point is, hey, we accept everyone and we don't need to overplay that, I think that as a stage or a stepping stone for an enclosed neurotypical world, that is an awakening to go, there are some people that are different. And even though they are extreme personality traits that are shown there, I'm going to fall in love with that character. I'm going to understand and accept that they're just quirky and different. And if Sheldon wants to sit in that seat, that same seat, for the rest of his life, and that's his spot, okay, well, in the course of the show and the social network within the show, that's accepted. And people, they look after each other, even though he's a bit different, you know? So I think that it's hard for us as autistic people to watch some of those shows because we aren't our target market. But I think it is an important stepping stone to inclusivity and awareness day to day when we have some commonly available examples for people to peg their thoughts on, to move quickly from, oh, you're not neurotypical, okay, it's just like Sheldon, I like Sheldon, perfect. Or, you know, I like the good doctor and he's really clever and he's got a girlfriend and he does a lot of normal stuff as well. Or, you know, oh yes, I watched Atypical, so I understand, you know, a little bit more than what I would if I didn't. You know, so there's a few interesting things like that. And, you know, again, we see a lot of similarities between that and the LGBTQI films, where we see, you know, a trans actor in something, or we'll see a openly gay relationship, or we'll see a couple of different things. And it's expanding that conservative majority into the possibility of there's different things out there and not everything is geared for me.
I read an interesting study many, many years ago that conservative households that enjoyed sitcoms with gay characters slowly became more tolerant. When you think about that, the idea that comedy with an outrageously openly gay or lesbian character, which the LGBTQ community might have found offensive in some ways, but those characters at the same time opened doors and broke down some of the barriers that conservative households had. So while they were laughing at something like The Birdcage, La Cage aux Folles, or they were laughing at certain characters in their portrayals on television, they were at the same time becoming more accepting of difference. Yeah, and I think that's what you're saying is that as they're laughing at and crying along with the autistic character that I may not consider or you may not consider realistic, that is still building a bridge of tolerance.
Absolutely. And you know what? Tolerance, and I also find this really interesting as well, the difference between tolerance and acceptance. So, tolerance is I disagree with you, but we're still going to get along because I tolerate what you're doing, even though I think it's wrong. Acceptance is I love you for who you are, or I accept that this is how I don't want to change you. It's just this is how you are, and I accept that, and we're just going to move forward from there. So, moving from a space of intolerant to tolerant to acceptance or even indifference than acceptance, I think for some conservative individuals can be a really, really long journey. And I think using comedy as a way of breaking down those barriers and using that connectable experience is a really positive thing. You know, we see some great shows like Will and Grace, for example. So many larger-than-life amazing characters in that. And that was a wonderful way to connect with a wide range of larger-than-life characters, both, gay and straight. And I think putting it in that context and framed the way it was a wonderful way to break down some of those walls. And I think, was it, I've used this quite a little bit, Hillary Clinton, when she said, when we break through a glass ceiling, everybody wins. And I think that that's true for autistics and people that aren't part of that majority. And I think as far as business and capitalism goes, a lot of things are geared at that majority because it is the largest purchasing group with financial purchasing power, and it's cheaper and easier to make stuff generically for that group. But does that provide us with a richness of culture, a richness of experience, and a richness of awareness? No, it doesn't really. It's just like recycling the same stuff. But if we can introduce more, then our awareness and our understanding of the world in which we live becomes so much greater. And the depth of who we are is even better.
I like the distinction between tolerance and acceptance. I have ranted about that quite a bit on the blog and on the podcast. I reached the point where just being tolerated would be wonderful. If someone could just get by and not be offended by some of the mannerisms and some of the autistic traits that I possess or that others possess, it would be wonderful to be tolerated long enough to demonstrate that I should be accepted. And that lack of tolerance is it's a big step, going from being an outsider to being sort of tolerated. Okay, we'll let him have an office and okay, he can kind of work, to being accepted. That would be a major leap. And obviously at my point in life now, I'm past the prime of careers and chasing after the money. By the time you're in your 50s, you're not going to be starting a new career in media and technology anymore. So there's that point. There's that level of saying, I just want to be tolerated long enough to put in 5 or 10 years somewhere. And so I certainly think that tolerance is important. And if we are able to get people to tolerate us through our dry wit, our dry humor, if someone takes us for funny, even when we're just being serious, all the better, I guess. Sometimes it's surprising what people laugh at a presentation, and I will sit there and think to myself, well, I just gave you the answer. I don't understand why it was so funny. The one that's common is when my wife and I were preparing to start a family, the question would come up as, why would you want children? You're autistic.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. Why does anyone want children?
For the tax breaks.
I don't know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, and what I said was, I really love theme
Yeah.
parks and zoos and museums, and going to them as an adult in your 50s looks kind of creepy. But as if I have a child that I can take to the zoo, I don't look so weird,
Especially if it's yours.
especially if it's my own child. It's always better to take a kid you know.
Yeah.
And, the audience is laughing, and I'm just sitting there thinking, no, I want to experience life through the eyes of a child again. There is something magical about experiencing. And so the question came up at one of the conferences, well, how were you and your wife going to have children? And it's like,
Sorry,
well,
what?
sex like everyone else.
Yeah. Wow.
And so people will find that like, oh, what a great line. And I'm like, what line? I didn't understand the question. What we were going to go, in the end, we adopted, and I love my daughters. They're certainly my family, and I'm thrilled that we have them.
But the only reason you adopted was to keep your figure.
Yeah, it was, it's one of those things people will ask, well, why did you adopt? And it's just like, well, because we were out of other choices. But they want some sort of great moral, oh no, we were trying to change the world for the, no, 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 it's not that complex. That was the path that nature put us on. And, when you say a truth like that on a stage, people laugh at it. If you are on stage doing the dry comedy of like a Stephen Wright comes to mind, where it's that dry, deadpan humor, there is that point where people are laughing and they think you're being funny when all as an autistic person you're trying to say is, no, we were going to start a family that required sexual intercourse. And they're finding it funny when, and if that builds tolerance, that they find it funny that we are just so impolite as to say things. Like, I'm asked about, and I know I've written about this quite a bit, and I'm sure you share it. I love the technology behind the media. I love the things that make what we do possible. I love the mixing boards, the cameras. That I am fascinated by cameras. I'm not very good with them, but I love them. They're like, wow, look at this really cool technology that captures light and turns it into an image that, whether it's film or digital, it's magic. But I want to understand it. And when I get into talking about my obsessions, and people think I'm telling jokes about being obsessed with, spending 6 hours trying to figure out what a button can and can't do, um, to me, I'm not being funny. I'm relating the autistic experiences. I got up at 5 a.m. this morning. It is now 9 p.m. I'll be up for another 2 or 3 hours. Um, if I'm doing what I love, autistics, we have our own time bubble.
Oh,
And I'm not
yes.
saying that to be funny.
Yeah.
It's And the parents will all laugh and like, oh yeah, my kid's that way too. That's so funny that I'm not making fun of it. I'm not celebrating it. I'm just stating a fact.
Yep. That's just what happens.
I got up, there was a problem, and I don't know. I just kept chasing it.
Yep. And that's part of that being engaged. Yeah.
And so people read our humor. Yeah, so I think our humor and our comedy, as far as presenters, a lot of that dry wit is us just asking questions or stating answers. And if that does lead to more tolerance and more acceptance for their children who are autistic and less of an effort to change them, then maybe some of the confusion's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's the frustrating thing for me, I think, is when you're a very quick thinker and you're able to change relatively quickly based on new, more accurate information. Sometimes those long journeys to get other people to come around to go, oh, okay, so I was basing a previous belief on something that was inaccurate and not factual at all. But it still took them, years and years and years to break that habit. I find that can sometimes be a very frustrating, slow process that I don't always have the patience for. But I understand a lot of people experience the world that way. And if we can do anything to sort of chip away at that, I think that's a really positive thing.
One of the truths that you have stated that, at least personal truths that you have stated, is that you are intelligent.
Yeah. Einstein said, great people know their greatness before anyone else. And it's not great in a I'm better than you way. It's just okay, well, I have done the self exploration to understand the asset that I have, and I wish to use that asset unashamedly.
One of the things that I do when talking about intelligence is I point out that what society measures as intelligent happens to be something I'm good at. You put a bubble test in front of me that is problem solution, concrete, there's a yes and a no, statistics, math, science. I'm going to do well on that test. It's not a test of, okay, now someone's making faces, tell me if they're happy or sad. That takes me a little bit longer than everyone else. But you give me a math problem, of course I'm going to blow it away. And so what happens is when people will say, "Oh, well, you must think you're smart," it says, "No, no, I'm very gifted at the things that are measured as intelligence." And then, of course, people are offended by that. They're like, "Well, wait, you're saying you are smart? Okay, if that's how you're going to define smart, then yes, I'm smart." And then you've offended them because you've dared to say that very thing that they were trying to say. It's like, well, yeah, I'm good at tests. Okay, and what's your point?
Yep, and yeah, Dr. Carl in Australia, we have an amazing scientific mind. Dr. Carl, as we know him, he's been on radio. He's written a whole heap of books from the University of Sydney, and he has done so much work at university as a student and also as a lecturer. And he said he's just very good. He has a very good memory, and he is just very good at what is required as evidence of knowledge within a university scenario. So, based on that, he was able to complete many degrees in many disciplines because he knew and was very good at how they tested if you had knowledge or not.
And to say so, it's so easy to offend people. So it's interesting that we have to walk this tightrope socially of knowing when or when not to say something. And of course, I typically fall into the trap of saying what I shouldn't say, correcting the teacher that I know is wrong. The teacher who is wrong, I will say.
That always goes over a treat.
Oh yeah, yeah. I must have been in fourth or fifth grade when I corrected the teacher who said a circle was 180 degrees. And right there, I'm just shouting, no, it's 360. There's another referral. I tend to have that low tolerance for mistakes, including with myself. If I make a mistake, I really am tough on myself. In my student evaluations, it's fascinating how kind and generous the students are. They're like, well, gee, Dr. Wyatt is always so fast to admit he doesn't know everything. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that what humans are supposed to do? I don't know that. But if you ask me, do I know something about film and media? Well, then I'm going to say, yes, I know that. And so, again, I'm not trying to be funny about that. I'm not. There are things I know, and I know them very well, and there are things I don't.
Oh, absolutely.
For one of my speaking demonstrations in front of students, I typically can bring in the computer parts, the components, and I assemble a PC in about 10 minutes, YouTube video style, right? And I build it as I talk about it and talk about what all the parts do. And I say, this is how you deliver a technical speech to the general public. People are like, wow, you're so good at that, and you're so great with technology and whatever. The wrong thing to say, but I say it, is, yes, I am.
But I also think that that's absolutely okay, and I think we should have more of that. If I knew that, someone was really passionate about something and knew lots about that subject, I would want them to say, hey, I know a lot about that, and I would say, me too, let's talk. It's a wonderful way to connect, as opposed to, oh, no, I only do a little bit of this, or I don't know that, or downplaying it. But then maybe that's just because of our two autistic minds talking to each other, going, well, I don't really understand the social conventions or reasoning behind that.
I think it is awesome that your website and your one of your mottos on the website anyway is brain for hire.
Yeah. My whole life is just feeding it.
Yeah, it's this. What is wrong with autistics saying, I am a really good problem solver, give me a problem? And I know on these TV shows and sitcoms, it becomes a joke that, this obsession we can take on, or this perseverance, whatever you want to call it. And it becomes humorous to other people, but it's my reality. I'm a good learner.
Yep. And it doesn't matter what industry or, what the problem is. I love the challenge. Give me the available resources and the issue you have, and let me solve it.
Do you use humor to pitch yourself to your clients?
Absolutely. There's either humor or technical ability, depending on what the problem and what the client needs. So for a lot of the media stuff that I do, a lot of it is definitely entertaining. And if we combine being articulate and a problem solver and randomly throwing humor in, it's quite a surprise when someone's a neurologically typical person is sitting there and listening to a technical explanation of a problem solution, and then you drop in a little bit of humor at the end of it, because that's two different ways of thinking, and I think one can help break down the other in a positive way to help get those better solutions and better connection and better cohesion. But yes, problem solving with humor is my favorite.
There are things that I can't answer, and so I frequently say so. The sleep issue is certainly one that I have posted about, that I've said I don't have the solutions. My doctors haven't offered solutions. So that would be something that I would love to learn more about. And when I say something like that, I need to learn more. That is, I think, the key to the autistic brain is when we don't know something and we find out there might be an answer, we will chase that answer. I don't know, maybe with reckless abandon.
Absolutely, and you know what? I'm absolutely doing the same as well. I'm very, very fortunate that I stumbled across a very, very good sleep scientist. Previously, I didn't even know such a thing existed, but some of the information and data and results-based stuff that I've been doing has been really, really great. And whether your sleep improves or not, based on that, you have a greater understanding of the sleep process and a greater understanding of what and how it works. Now, I am not a sleep scientist, but I'm more than happy to share my knowledge and experiences of working with a sleep scientist as an autistic man.
And I think things like that just give other autistics hope. The fact that you and I have used humor, and you do it in person probably more frequently than I ever could, but as a writer and as someone who deals with words, I rely on humor, or what people perceive as humor, to stay employed.
And you know what? Even the concept of being employed is a really interesting one for autistic people. I've found the most challenging time in my world and the most draining time in my world is when I've had a 9 to 5, 5-day a week job. I find it very draining and very challenging for me, which is why the majority of my life I've been either self-employed or working as doing project-based work, because that enables me the autonomy to have that downtime or start later or manage my own person in a way that is sustainable for me.
And I think when we look at some of the better known autistics, most of those individuals are consultants and freelancers. I know that myself, I do better with the university schedule where I get some flexibility. I can teach Tuesday, Thursday. I can recover on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which everyone thinks sounds absurd, but it really does take me a whole day sometimes to recover from just teaching one day. I need a whole day off the next day.
Yeah, and I separate them as not a day off because that rarely goes over so well because it's not really a day off. That's still considered a work day. Your recovery day is still considered a productive work day because you would not have been able to do that day of work if you didn't have that recovery day. So I call them high energy and low energy days. So a high energy day, and it makes it easier to explain to people so they don't go, well, why does he only have to show up half the time? Well, he's still working because that's what he needs to do to work, or she needs to do, or they need to do to work. You know, it's a high energy day, which is face to face or contact hours, and a low energy day might be just scrolling through your inbox, doing some prep work, you know, all of that sort of lower energy stuff that you can do with a cup of coffee, or, you know, you can have a nap at lunchtime to recharge, or you can do whatever that thing is, that self-soothing thing that provides you with that energy, go back into the world.
The challenges of a 9 to 5, something I touched on. Yeah, it's draining. That whole social environment, that setting is so exhausting.
And the subtext of work relationships outside of your core role. How do you manage that? You know, it's very challenging.
I think there was nothing quite as off-putting as having the evaluation say that I wasn't social enough, that I wasn't engaged outside of the workplace. And part of me is like, yeah, you didn't hire me for that, did you? And finding out, oh wait, no, they did. They hire people they want to spend time with and have a beer with, and I'm not interested.
You know, I find that really interesting as well when we look at neurologically typical workplaces. How and the I know when we look at career advancement, it has very little to do with actually what you're paid to do. A lot of it is the social side of it. And I would argue that the social side is more important than whatever it is you're hired to do. So if you happen to be good at what you're paid to do as well, that's a great bonus, but not essential.
Absolutely. It goes back to what I was saying about why I teach business and economic students how to communicate. Is it's that ugly truth that the person who's going to run the bank or run the corporation is going to be charming and charismatic and calculating in all of the wrong ways at times. And if you want to counter that person, you better learn some communication skills and networking skills and not trading your soul for those. That's important. But you need to be able to stand in front of a group. You need to be able to stand up and speak, because you don't want to be drowned out by that loudest, most aggressive, most charming voice in the room.
Which is what, as humans, we define as a leader, is whoever speaks loudest and speaks first.
And for those of us who are autistic, we might speak loudly or with reckless abandon, but we don't have that charisma that goes along with it. So we're perceived, instead of as charming, we become threatening.
Yeah.
Or just annoying. One or the other. Either really threatening or really annoying, but either way, you're not getting promoted.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I haven't. I do my thing, and you know, I'm always open to collaborate with like-minded individuals for mutual benefit. I really enjoy working with other people and doing stuff like that. It's just the opportunity doesn't come up so much because intelligent people are a threat. And when you speak your mind, politicking is not something that you engage in as often as you probably should. But
at least not on the individual face-to-face type of politicking.
Yeah, I prefer authenticity over politicking, and I feel like they're mutually exclusive.
It's interesting because I know quite a few autistics who work in politics as data analysts. They work in big data. They're very good at crunching numbers, doing poll analysis, doing trends, doing economics, doing forecasts, and all of those things are important. And so they have these roles in politics, and people say, "Oh, wow, you're really engaged in the political system, and you must be so skilled with." Like, no, the behind the scenes people are not the politician. I can crunch numbers, but I'm not going to be on stage, running for office, and because I'm going to say all those things I really think about the voters.
Yeah, that are statistically accurate.
Oh yeah. I'd be that person who would say, well, guess what? Half of you are below average. That's how that works. um, yeah, that brutal honesty. But we don't mind being behind the scenes, but the problem is behind the scenes doesn't always get you that recognition or promotion. And like you said earlier, um, society favors that. They favor that extrovert so much, and it's just by nature the autistic is at a disadvantage unless we come up with masking skills, unless we can harness our own dry wit, unless we can come up with ways to play the game but not engaging in the game.
It's very much like the Matrix, really, when we look at it. And one of my challenges, as I see with a lot of other autistic people, is once you see through the veil, once you see through the game or see through whatever's happening, it's very, very hard to play it and unsee it. And that tends to come out in a lot of your interactions or the interactions. And that is not advantageous a lot of times. But it is, I think it's very, I think it's good to note that we're able to, at times, see through all of that and go, oh, okay, I understand what's happening here, but no one's admitting that or no one's talking about that, but I understand and see what's happening.
I was criticized. I was at a higher education event and they were talking about diversity and how, we support the diversity movements worldwide. And while they were saying this, I was looking around the room, and of course, I was the one who said, "Okay, that's great, but why are we all white, upper middle class? Why are we all the same? If we're saying we support diversity, why is it our professor of African American literature is white? I may be missing something here, but I bet there's a professor who happens to be a black professor who would love to have the job teaching what we currently call African American lit, but they may come in and tell us it's black lit or whatever. But we don't have that person on staff to tell us what to call it. We're sitting here saying we believe in diversity. Yay. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, our level of diversity goes as far as we have some Jews, some Catholics, and some atheists. That's our diversity. Our diversity is not, it's not very deep. And so I'm the one to say that. And of course that becomes, no. See, you've said the truth. The truth is, if we really believed in diversity, we'd recruit and hire. But this way we can take the HR training, pass the HR training, and tell ourselves we're aware of our white fragility, but not actually have to do anything.
Yeah, and with the whole diversity thing, I think that's a really important thing to note. And, I don't. Sometimes I can be a little bit slow to understand or truly get some of those concepts. Not because I don't want to or I don't understand, but I struggle with how they're explained and what we're talking about, but how it's not practiced or not done. So, even if we look at gender equality, we've still got such a long way to go with that. And we've got a long way to go with racial equality. And then neurologically, we've got so many differences there. And I think it comes back to the majority being scared of whatever's different, or giving unconsciously giving power or a little bit more power to a group that is not them. And, I could be wrong. I don't have all the answers.
One of my autistic colleagues who happens to be black commented recently, he goes, you take a look at the Black Lives Matter movement in America, and he looked at me and he said it very seriously. You guys gentrified the neighborhood and now you're gentrifying our protests.
Yeah, excellent point.
And you sit there and you think to yourself, okay, I can see it. Yeah, all of the people in the front of the line of the protest are middle-class white college grads. Okay, I can, yeah. And, the autistic person is the one who says that. He has no qualms about saying to him, we've gentrified protesting, which seems almost impossible. But, and people will look at that blunt truth that an autistic individual can say, and it's like, well, he cut through all of the BS in an instant with that comment, and everyone else is like, well, wait, what is, huh? But like you said,
and do you know what? In relation to the Black Lives Matters gentrification of the protests. I totally agree with that, and I think that's really great. The upside of having white college grads at the front of those protests is because they're white, they're less likely to get shot. But I understand what you're saying. I think it's absolutely right. And we are very fortunate as talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, we are very fortunate as white people to have to learn about inequality, to have to learn about racism and the effects of racism. That's a very big position of privilege to learn about it rather than to experience it. And we are also very fortunate that there are some very, very articulate and honest and open Black voices out there that have created some wonderful resources for everybody to learn more about the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial injustices and some of the issues that are out there, that we don't have to find our black friend and go, hey, explain to me this, explain to me that, because they're tired. And I think there's similarities there between all minority or marginalized groups having to not only endure that, but also explain and teach their way out of it. And I think that having that awareness and that understanding and using some of those great online resources to educate ourselves in a self-directed learning kind of way, I think is just so positive.
I began this discussion with your use of humor and your move towards humor, and I think when I think of civil rights and movements again, there was a wonderful time when Norman Lear here in the United States was remaking British and Australian shows here for the U.S. market, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, and bringing this humor. And then we also had Sanford and Sons and other shows. Those shows were sitcoms, and they used that comedy again to break down those racial stereotypes, to break down those barriers. And I don't see that as we currently have a few TV shows that do that, but we have become so splintered with 150 channels to choose from that instead of 2 or 3 channels, that not everyone is seeing this and experiencing it. And I'm hoping that humor and wit can bring people together, but sometimes I do fear that we are so splintered that not everyone, even with the best of comedy, with the best of writing, with the best of media, will receive these messages. And sometimes that's disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that comes to or talk to the point about culture. And we see in a smaller scale within large organizations, we have an awareness of culture management. And how can we create a corporate culture within a business that upholds the values of our workplace, that upholds the value of our working community? What is that? How do we identify that, and how do we support that by creating consciously that culture? And I think as a country, being the US, being Australia, being New Zealand, being Germany or any other country on the planet, how can as a government or as an organization or as a community, how can we consciously create those values, and how can we communicate them to strengthen them, whatever they are? A lot of times, the culture we end up with is the unconscious culture that evolves after we do what we want. Whereas I believe that we should have some more effort and energy put into our cultural values, or a country's cultural values. And I think we saw that a lot more before travel became so easy and affordable. Each country was more of a microcosm within itself, and there was less awareness, or less lived and experienced awareness outside of those countries. So we obviously had more of a distillation of that culture within that space. Whereas now we're starting to see the blending of cultures. We're starting to see the homogenization of the human race, courtesy of media, travel, and a whole heap of other things. So I think now more than ever, it's really important to go, well, what are our values? Personally, what are my values? How can I live to those values? And if I am not practicing living up to those values, I can self-assess and go, why am I not doing that? And how can I look at improving that part of me or changing that value or being honest about that? And then on a larger scale, how can I do that within my family, within my workplace, within my group, and then ultimately as a country, and a community, how can we do that? How can we create those positive values for almost a utopian self-managed society where we can have shared values for the positive good of the community? Interesting point, interesting thought. Will it happen? Probably not, but it's still a change that can start with each individual.
Autistics, I know, tend to be very open and very tolerant because we care more about the accomplishments and the knowledge and the information exchange we can have with another person than the background of that person. So I wonder if we struggle sometimes to understand the bigotries and the hatreds around us when they don't always seem they don't seem believable, they don't seem understandable, they don't seem possible to the autistic. I don't understand a lot of what goes on around me. I just don't. And I sit there and I try to analyze it and I read history books and I read philosophy and, I'll steep myself in a particular culture trying to understand its problems. And in the end, all I can think of is, I don't get it.
I absolutely agree. I find this world presents a lot of challenges, and I find that I almost, as an autistic guy, I have to manage my exposure to those challenges in order to process them properly at the time. Which speaks to a bit of a different point, but we are overwhelmed with changes and challenges in that sense. So choosing what we focus on and actually resolving some of those issues to start with, either within ourselves, within our community, and the things that we can change, can help open us up and our energy up to looking at some of those bigger problems and working with those bigger problems or having capacity to deal with them.
You have found ways to cope with some of that input, some of that overload, some of that emotional drain that occurs. I think for many of us who aren't aware of possible solutions, we just carry around all this weight and burden because we don't know how to release, or maybe not even expel, but how to control and relate to those emotions, that alienation, everything that goes on in the autistic brain, the empathetic overload, it's like the weight of the world on us because we see the suffering everywhere and we see the injustice and we see all this horror and we just can't understand it, and it becomes horrific.
It does, and there's a lot of stress associated with that, going, well, I don't understand, why would you choose to kill a whole population of people rather than just work out the problem? Because my value intrinsically is that we can all get along. Why would we want to do that? There are a lot of atrocities in the world, and I really struggle sometimes to watch and understand it because I have a need to go and fix that, or to go and help, or to go make a difference, or to go relieve the suffering of another person somehow through, once I've seen that story, I'm a do it now kind of guy. And that creates a lot of stress and mental anguish for me. And I'm sure it does for a lot of other autistic people as well, because, I don't know if that's clearly understanding that someone else is in need and wanting to provide that empathy for them. But then on top of that, also in some way understanding and connecting to our own lived experience of being ostracized or being hurt or being challenged in some way, and feeling in some way what that other person could be experiencing. But either way, it's about managing that and going, well, how can I find some really positive outlets to make that difference, to try and get that feeling so that I don't feel so overwhelmed by the world and the things that are happening in it that I can't control.
And somehow you have managed to turn all this into a very successful entrepreneurial pursuit of being a media person. You have turned all of this energy into something positive for yourself and for others. And that's something that I think a lot of autistics want to know is possible. They want to believe that there are ways to, instead of hiding in a corner, cowering, afraid, that we can harness that fear, that anxiety, and turn it into something positive for ourselves. So we can be, whether it's tolerated or laughed with instead of laughed at. But I think that's what we want, is we want to know from each other that the autistic me, Christopher Scott Wyatt, can look at the autistic Ben and say, wow, I could learn from him and my life will be improved and I won't have to feel so alone and isolated um, as an autistic adult.
Yeah, and I love the idea of supporting and learning from each other. And I think that that's such a positive thing. And even if you can't take anything away from this other than there is another adult autistic person in the world that's having the same challenges as me or similar challenges as me, I think there's even comfort in that as well, to go, you're not alone. And the medium of podcast, I think, is absolutely wonderful because you're able to listen to it and re-listen to it, and it's non-threatening, and it's less draining than a face-to-face conversation. So I think that what you're doing here is absolutely amazing in helping a range of autistic people and a range of neurologically typical people to understand more about their own autism or their partner's autism or their son or daughter's autism or their child's autism. And I think that combined with bringing a whole range of stories is us as an autistic network working together to change the world for each and every one of us. And I think that's a really positive thing.
I thank you for being a part of it and being out there as a voice in the community that's willing to say that we are more complex, that we are successful in our own ways because we get to define what success is. We shouldn't have success defined for us. And I think that that's important for autistics to hear because so often we are told, oh, this is what success is. It is this set of markers. As we're success for me is I wake up in the morning and I've got my wife, my kids, and yeah, okay, I'm alive. Yay. And that sounds sarcastic, but no, that's actually a pretty good life, all things considered. But I'm waking up in a comfortable home in a comfortable place with my family. It really can't get much better than that.
And there's a lot of people at different stages of how they feel and their energy, where a huge win or success is waking up, having a shower, brushing your teeth, eating all your meals, drinking water, and putting pants on. And that is equally as special, equally as important, equally as valid as having a home, going to work, or doing anything else. It's still a huge energetic win to even cover those neurologically typical basics that we all need to do, because some days they can be very draining. So to everyone that got up out of bed today, to everyone that ticked off any goal on their list, well done. don't ever let anyone make you feel less for achieving a personal goal that you've set and you've achieved.
I love that. That is exactly what I want to convey to everyone. You know, I think it is so important for me to tell parents, tell autistic individuals, tell caregivers and educators, I get to define my success. And today, my success was that I drove across town without a panic attack.
Huge win.
It's a win for me. I got in a car and I navigated across the traffic of a Texas city uh, alive, and that just feels. You know, it sound people don't believe uh, when I say that driving is a major accomplishment for an autistic, or that showing up every day for my job as an instructor, even those days where I'm on the edge of a meltdown, those are victories. Those when you are, I am sure you have experienced that when you have pushed yourself through something that you know was going to have
A delayed reaction that's not positive.
yeah, you were going to pay a price for meeting with a client. You were going to pay a price for going and doing some stand up or doing a show, showing up at a conference. You're going to pay a price for that.
Yep. Yep.
That's a success. You push through it. Wow.
And also to acknowledge that and give yourself the recovery time afterwards as a reward for doing so well. That's okay too, you know, and we all take those risks and we all calculate those things. And every day there are some huge wins that autistic people go through and do that they may not self-acknowledge in their quest to be seem neurotypical or seem to be normal based on the societal norms. But we need to celebrate those little wins and those personal victories every day to provide us with the momentum and the realistic understanding that for us, we are doing really well. We are moving forward and we are tackling some of the big issues that a lot of autistic people have day to day within their own heads and within their own worlds.
Ben, I can't think of a better way to end an hour or so together. I I really appreciate this, and I think that this is going to be the kind of thing that people need to hear, and as you said, maybe rehear and take into consideration that we started talking about humor, and then we're ending on this very serious note. You got up today, you and you functioned, and that may mean you relied on a lot of other people. I think it's a victory that I can admit to myself I need my wife to help keep me organized, and before that I needed mentors to keep me organized, and before that I needed my parents to keep me organized. But you know what, I knew well enough to say I need some help, and that in itself is a form of independence.
Absolutely. The ability to know oneself is the greatest gift that you can give not only yourself, but anyone else.
I hope other autistics appreciate that message. I hope everyone in their lives appreciates that message.
Oh, and please share this wonderful podcast and the series. We need to get as many people subscribed to your podcast as possible because you're providing stories. Having listened to the last 30 or so episodes, you're providing some great insight and some great stories in bite-sized pieces to help improve the lives of people. So thank you so much for that. And if any of your listeners would like to, I know we've been very serious here, if they would like to enjoy some of the lighter stuff that I do, they can definitely check me out on Instagram, where there is more light and superfluous stuff.
I think it's important to put these in the show notes. So, Ben, let's engage in some shameless self-promotion here. It's important.
Yay!
Yes.
Here's some I prepared earlier. You can. I've got a website with all the social links and a heap of other fun stuff. It is Ben Sorensen 1 because some other person took Ben Sorensen. So it's bensorensen1.com, and all of my socials are Ben Sorensen 1. So super easy to find anywhere. If you did hear the podcast, just drop a comment on something and let me know because I always love to connect with fellow autistic people and, or people that have a strong autistic influence within their life. So definitely make yourself known. Don't be shy and connect with us. Love it.
Oh, we appreciate it so much. So you've been listening to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt, and this has been Ben Sorensen on the other end. So, Ben, why don't you sign us on out of here?
It's been an amazing hour. It has been an amazing chat, and I hope to do it again. Keep being autistic, keep being magical, and just keep being awesome. Thanks so much.